Increase that tragic shooting in Louisiana. You're looking at Jason Allen in Shreveport in front of one of the crime scenes. Jason, this is an horrific story. Good morning to you. What can you tell us?
Yeah, it's just some terrible details about this morning, Errol. Good morning to you. This was the nation's deadliest shooting in more than 2 years. And police say that the gunman shot 10 people, killed those 8 children, all in this house that is directly behind me.
Sunday morning, April 19, 2026. Shreveport, Louisiana. The city was still dark. Most people were asleep. Church clothes were already laid out for the morning. Coffee hadn't been started yet. The kind of quiet that only exists before the world remembers it has to wake up. At 5:55 a.m., a call came through to Shreveport Police Dispatch. A woman was on a roof. Someone had been shot inside the house below her. That was all she could get out before the line filled with the kind of terror that doesn't need words to explain itself. First responders arrived at the 300 block of West 79th Street at 6:01 a.m. What they found inside that house on a Sunday morning in Cedar Grove is something that none of them will ever fully leave behind. 10 people had been shot. 8 of them were dead. And every single one of those 8 was a child. 3 boys, 5 girls. The youngest was 3 years old. Think about that for 1 second. 3 years old. She had barely learned how to say her own name out loud. Hi viewers. Here is a question for you in the comments right now. Did you hear about this case when it first broke, yes or no? The oldest was 11. In between those 2 ages were 6 more children, all of them gone before the city had finished waking up. All of them killed inside a home where they were supposed to be safe. Most of them found exactly where they had been sleeping. Their names were Jayla, Shayla, Braylin, Caleb, Kadarian, Layla, Markaden, Serayah. Say those names slowly, because this story is going to give every single one of them the weight they deserve.
Just yesterday evening, he was sitting on the porch, and I waved at him. He waved back. The children were in the yard playing, and I just come in the house. And then this morning, we woke up to all of this.
Cedar Grove is the kind of neighborhood where people know each other by name. Where kids play in the front yard while neighbors wave from across the street. Where Saturday afternoons look like Saturday afternoons are supposed to look. Porches, laughter, the sound of a grill somewhere down the block. The man who lived at that house on West 79th Street was known in that neighborhood. Not as a stranger, not as someone people crossed the street to avoid. He was someone they waved at. Someone whose children they recognized. Someone whose name they knew. His name was Shamar Elkins. He was 31 years old. He was a veteran, a father of 7, a man who had served 7 years in the Louisiana Army National Guard. A man who went to work at UPS. A man who, just the afternoon before, had been sitting on his front porch watching his children play in the yard while a neighbor waved at him from across the street. And sometime in the hours between that Saturday evening and 5:55 on that Sunday morning, Shamar Elkins carried out something that had been building for years. Not hours, not days, years. But here is the detail that most coverage never slowed down long enough to say out loud. Before Elkins ever arrived at the house on West 79th Street that morning, he had already gone somewhere else first. 1 block away, a different address, a different door. He knocked, and the woman who opened that door was shot 9 times before she could fully process what was happening. That woman was the mother of 3 of the 8 children who would be found dead that morning. And she survived, and she is part of why this story is not just a tragedy. It is a case study in everything that was seen, everything that was known, and everything that was never connected until it was too late. This is not a story about a man who snapped. That framing is too simple, too convenient, and it lets every system that failed those 8 children completely off the hook. This is a story about a 2019 weapons conviction that legally barred Shamar Elkins from touching a firearm until 2029. A conviction that was on file. A prohibition that existed in writing. This is a story about a threat made inside a marriage in 2023. A specific, detailed, explicit threat. A man telling his wife exactly what he would do if she ever tried to leave. A threat that was never reported, never entered into any database, never reached any authority. This is a story about a January 2026 hospitalization at the Veterans Affairs Facility in Shreveport, following a confirmed suicide attempt, after which Elkins was discharged back into the exact same conditions that had brought him there. This is a story about an Easter Sunday phone call, 2 weeks before the shooting, where he told his own family that some people do not come back from their demons.
Were they crawling out of windows to get onto a roof?
Yes, so actually this house right here that you see behind us, there's a window right above the garage. They actually climbed out of that window, we believe, and unfortunately one of the children was actually located deceased on the roof. So we are working to determine, we do believe that he shot the child while the child was on the roof trying to get away.
No welfare check was made after that call. No crisis line was contacted. No one called police. 5 separate data points. 5 separate systems, law enforcement records, the VA, the court system, the family, the neighborhood, none of it ever assembled into a single picture. None of it ever acted on in time. And on the morning of April 19, 2026, 8 children paid for that with everything they had. This case is not closed. The investigations are still open. And the questions this case forces, about veterans' mental health, about domestic violence lethality screening, about illegal firearm transfers between convicted felons, are questions that do not have clean answers yet. But before any of that, you need to understand who Shamar Elkins actually was. Not the headline version, not the surface, the full picture. Because the full picture is the only thing that explains how a man who coached his own children and posted dinner photos with laughing emojis the night before could do what he did before the sun came up. That story starts long before April 19th. It starts in Cedar Grove, with a teenage mother who couldn't stay, with a woman named Betty Walker who stepped in and raised him as her own, with a boy who grew into a soldier, and a soldier who came home carrying more than his discharge papers ever documented. It starts with a marriage, and a threat, and a court date that was set for the morning after everything fell apart. It starts with all the moments where someone saw something, felt something, or knew something, and the systems around them were never built to catch what they were carrying. Shamar Dwan Elkins was born on December 7, 1994, in Shreveport, Louisiana. He came into the world in Cedar Grove, the same North Side neighborhood where this story ends. His biological mother, Mahalia Elkins, was a teenager when she had him. She was battling a crack cocaine addiction she could not shake. She could not raise him. She could not stay, so someone else did. A family friend named Betty Walker stepped in. She became the woman who actually raised Shamar from childhood. She was his foundation, his consistency, the person who showed up when his mother couldn't. Mahalia and Shamar would eventually reconnect years later, in the mid-2010s, after he was already an adult and already a soldier. But Betty Walker was the one who built him, and Betty Walker would be one of the last people to understand what he had become. At 18 years old, Shamar Elkins enlisted in the Louisiana Army National Guard. 7 years. That is how long he served, as a signal support system specialist and a fire support specialist. These were not background roles. These were positions that required weapons training, coordination of firepower, and the ability to operate under sustained pressure. He understood how weapons worked. He understood how to plan under stress. He understood how to stay calm when everything around him was not. He was never deployed overseas. He left the Guard in August 2020 as a private, the lowest enlisted rank available. And he returned to Cedar Grove with no documented transition support on public record. 7 years of military structure. Then nothing. No bridge, no program, no system waiting on the other side to catch him. He went to work at UPS. A co-worker named Willie Vasher spoke to the New York Times about the man he worked alongside. Vasher described Elkins as someone who appeared to be a devoted family man. Showed up, did the work, talked about his kids, but Vasher also noticed something he could not explain away. A bald spot on Elkins's head. Not from genetics, from stress. Elkins pulled his own hair out throughout the workday, strand by strand, every single shift.
We believe there were multiple weapons used here. There is a handgun that was recovered at this scene, and then there was a rifle-style handgun that was recovered on his person.
His family had noticed it too. The people closest to him could see something was pulling at him from the inside. Nobody asked what it meant. That is the sentence that keeps coming back in this case. Everyone around Shamar Elkins could see the edges of something wrong, and nobody asked what it meant. By 2026, Elkins was managing 2 households simultaneously. He was married to a woman named Pugh, with whom he shared 4 children. He also had a previous marriage to Christina Snow, with whom he had 3 more children. Christina lived on Harrison Street, 1 block away from the West 79th Street home where Elkins lived with Shaniqua. 1 block, 2 families, financial pressure stretched across both, a marriage quietly dissolving, and a criminal history that most people in his life knew nothing about. Here is where the timeline shifts. In 2016, Elkins was convicted of a DWI. That was the first one. Serious, documented, on record. But it was not the conviction that changed everything. The one that changed everything happened in 2019. Elkins was arrested near Caddo Magnet High School in Shreveport. According to a police report cited by local news station KTBS, he pulled a 9mm handgun from his waistband and fired 5 rounds at a vehicle approximately 300 feet from the school. Children were present outside at the time. His account was that the driver had pointed a weapon at him first. The school property charge was ultimately dismissed. He pleaded guilty to illegal use of a weapon. He received 18 months of probation. 18 months of probation for firing a weapon near a school full of children. And under Louisiana law, that conviction placed a hard legal prohibition on Shamar Elkins. He was barred from possessing any firearm until at least 2029. Not a suggestion, not a warning, a legal prohibition, on record, in the system. On the morning of April 19, 2026, he had 2 weapons. A small caliber handgun, and a Mossberg rifle-style pistol that police described as an assault pistol, which he was still carrying when officers confronted him in Bossier City hours after the shooting. 2 weapons, a man legally prohibited from touching either one. The question of how those weapons reached him would produce federal charges 2 days later. But that answer comes after you understand what was already broken long before the guns ever entered the picture. Because the conviction was not the thing that should have stopped this. There was something else, something older, something that sat inside a marriage for nearly 3 years without ever reaching a single authority, a single database, or a single court document. And that is where this story takes its first turn into the territory that researchers who study this kind of violence say matters more than almost anything else. The year was 2023. Shaniqua Pugh had been thinking about leaving. According to Betty Walker, the woman who raised Elkins and who spoke directly to the New York Times, when Shaniqua raised the possibility of leaving and taking the children with her, Shamar Elkins did not beg. He did not cry. He did not ask her to stay. He told her exactly what he would do. If she left, if she tried to take those children, he would end her life. He would end the children's lives. And then he would end his own. That was not an argument. That was not a fight that got out of hand. That was a structured, 3-part declaration. A plan with a stated outcome. Researchers who study intimate partner homicide are consistent on this point. Explicit pre-separation death threats, especially ones that include the children, are among the strongest statistical predictors of lethal violence. They are not impulsive outbursts. They function as something closer to a contract. The relationship ends on his terms, or it does not end at all. Shaniqua stayed. Betty Walker said she ultimately set the threat aside after Elkins told her he was just playing. And so the family absorbed it, normalized it, filed it somewhere in the back of the memory where uncomfortable things go when no one is ready to face them directly. They married in April 2024. 1 year after that threat, Shaniqua eventually filed for divorce citing infidelity. That detail was confirmed to CNN by Troy Brown, Elkins's brother-in-law, who lived inside the West 79th Street home. The divorce moved forward through the court system. Quietly, officially, irreversibly. The court date to finalize the divorce was set for Monday, April 20, 2026. The morning after the shooting. That threat from 2023 was never reported to police. It never entered a domestic violence database. It never appeared in any court filing. It never reached any system that could have flagged it as relevant when the divorce proceedings began. It sat as private family knowledge for nearly 3 years. And the moment the legal process of ending that marriage reached its final stage, something that had been dormant activated. Now add the next layer. In January 2026, Shamar Elkins checked himself into the Veterans Affairs Hospital in Shreveport for a mental health evaluation. Troy Brown confirmed this to Time magazine and the Associated Press. Betty Walker confirmed separately to the New York Times that this admission followed a suicide attempt.
The coroner's office here has released the names and the ages of all of those children. 5 girls, 3 boys, all of them between 3 and 11 years old. Now, Elkins has a previous weapons charge, something he pleaded guilty to back in 2019. But Errol, police are still looking into what it was that prompted this shooting Sunday morning.
He recognized that something inside him had reached a point he could not manage alone. He walked in voluntarily. He stayed approximately 10 days. Then he was discharged. Troy Brown told reporters that when Elkins came home, he seemed better. He was talking about being a good father, about getting things right. Brown asked him directly whether he felt he needed to go back to the hospital. Elkins said he was fine, that he would just deal with it. Brown later told the Associated Press, and these words are worth sitting with, "I wish he went ahead and got him the help." What the VA discharged Shamar Elkins back into was not a stable environment. It was a marriage in active legal dissolution, financial pressure across two households, no documented follow-up support structure on public record, the same conditions that had produced the crisis in the first place, untouched and unchanged. Within weeks, the deterioration continued. Easter Sunday, April 5, 2026. 2 weeks before the shooting, Elkins called his mother Mahalia and his stepfather Marcus Jackson. He was in tears. He told them that Shaniqua had filed for divorce, that he was being consumed by dark thoughts he could not push away. His stepfather tried to steady him, tried to offer reassurance. Elkins responded with a sentence that should have been a 5-alarm signal to every person who heard it. He said, "Some people don't come back from their demons." Then the call ended. No crisis line was contacted. No welfare check was requested. No one called police. And as the New York Times noted in its reporting, most families respond exactly this way, because most of the time a phone call like that does not end the way this one did. The family's response was not unusual. What was unusual was the complete picture that the family could not see. They did not know about the weapons prohibition. They did not have access to the 2023 death threat in any official capacity. They did not know what the VA discharge assessment had or had not flagged. They were carrying one piece of a puzzle that had five data points, spread across 5 separate systems. A 2019 weapons conviction sitting in law enforcement records. A January 2026 VA hospitalization following a confirmed suicide attempt. A divorce proceeding with a finalization date set for the following morning. A 2023 death threat that existed only in private family memory. And an Easter Sunday crisis call that dissolved into silence. Never connected, never assembled, never acted on. Not one of those 5 systems ever spoke to another. And in the space between all of them, something that had been building for years continued to build, quietly, steadily, until there was no space left. The question that remains unanswered publicly to this day is what Elkins's VA discharge assessment actually contained. Was a lethality screening conducted before he was released? Was the pending divorce flagged as an escalating risk factor? Was the 2019 firearms prohibition ever cross-referenced with his discharge plan? The VA has not publicly addressed any of those questions. And 8 families in Shreveport are now living inside that silence permanently. Saturday afternoon, April 18, 2026. Less than 12 hours before the first call to dispatch, Freddie Montgomery, a neighbor who lived across the street from the West 79th Street home, walked past and saw Shamar Elkins sitting on the front porch. The children were playing in the yard. The 2 men made eye contact. They waved. Montgomery told CNN there was nothing in that moment, not a look, not a word, not a single thing, that suggested anything was wrong. That is the part that stays with people. Not the violence, the normalcy that came right before it. That same Saturday evening, Elkins took his eldest daughter to dinner. Just the 2 of them. He posted about it on social media afterward. Smiling, laughing emojis, a photograph over a burger, a father and his child. The kind of post that looks like every other parent's weekend caption. That was the night before. At 9 o'clock that evening, Troy Brown left the West 79th Street house for his night shift. He said Elkins was calm, joking around, helped move Brown's car out of the driveway so he could pull out. Nothing unusual, nothing tense, just a man standing in a driveway on a Saturday night. Brown's nephew, Markaden Pugh, 10 years old and cousin to Elkins's biological children, was alive inside the house when Brown drove away. Markaden did not survive the night. The hours between 9 in the evening and 5:55 the following morning are not fully documented in any public source. What went on inside Shamar Elkins during those hours, what he thought about, what he told himself, what he decided, exists only in whatever investigation is still ongoing. No public account covers it. No witness has filled it in. What is documented is where those hours ended. Not at West 79th Street. 1 block over, Harrison Street. Before the sun came up. Before most of Shreveport had moved. Elkins arrived at the door of Christina Snow, his ex-wife and the mother of 3 of his children. He knocked. She opened the door. He shot her 9 times. Then he took all 3 of her children, Braylin, Kadarian, and Serayah, and drove to West 79th Street. Christina Snow survived. Her aunt, LaShun Berry, told CNN that after being shot, Christina used Siri to call 911. She was conscious. She gave investigators a full account of what had happened at her door before sunrise. That account became part of the investigation. At West 79th Street, Shinqua's sister Kosha Pugh was inside the home with her 12-year-old daughter. When the attack began, Kosha grabbed her daughter and they went up. Not out. Up. They reached the roof. Kosha called 911 from up there while what was happening below them was still happening. Both she and her daughter jumped. Both sustained broken bones. Both survived. That 911 call hit dispatch at 5:55 a.m. Police spokesperson Chris Bordelon later confirmed that most of the children appeared to have been shot while they were sleeping. Most were found with wounds to the head. 7 of the 8 were discovered inside the home. The 8th was found on the back roof. Bullet holes were recovered from the rear door of the house, physical evidence that at least some of those children had tried to reach the back exit and did not make it through. Troy Brown's wife also escaped by jumping from the roof. Their 2-year-old daughter went with her and survived with scratches. Brown arrived home from his shift to find his nephew dead inside the house where he had left him joking and alive just hours before. Officers arrived at 6:01 a.m. At 6:07, dispatch received the separate call connected to Harrison Street. 3 minutes later, at 6:10, the 2 locations were linked. At 6:20, officers received information suggesting that Christina's 3 children might be inside a carjacked vehicle Elkins had taken after leaving West 79th Street. At 6:40, officers confirmed the vehicle was empty. The Caddo Parish Coroner's Office confirmed all 8 children were found and pronounced at the West 79th Street address, including Christina Snow's 3. The precise sequence of exactly what happened between the 2 addresses that morning remains part of the active investigation. Behavioral researchers who study familicide, the specific pattern of a parent killing their own children, document one consistent finding. These acts are almost never impulsive. They are planned, sometimes across days, sometimes across months. The perpetrator in the hours before typically presents as calm, sometimes unusually so. The trigger is not a sudden explosion of rage. It is the perception of a point of no return. A finalization, a court date, a moment when the ability to control the outcome disappears entirely. Every single element of that pattern was present on the night of April 18, 2026. The dinner, the social media post, the calm in the driveway, the jokes, the wave from the neighbor the afternoon before. None of it was a contradiction. In the documented pattern of familicide, it fits exactly. The divorce papers were ready. The court date was hours away. The marriage was ending with or without his consent. And for a man who had told his wife 3 years earlier that it would only end one way, that court date was not a legal proceeding. It was a deadline. After leaving West 79th Street, Elkins carjacked a vehicle. Shreveport police pursued him. The chase moved into Bossier City. When the vehicle stopped, Elkins produced a handgun. Officers responded. A claim later surfaced on social media from an account identified as belonging to someone described as a former Army mentor of Elkins, stating that Elkins had come to his home. They spoke briefly, and Elkins then ended his own life. That post was subsequently deleted. The Shreveport Bossier Advocate confirmed the claim existed but noted the removal of the post. Louisiana State Police spokesperson Eddie Thomas confirmed the investigation would not be rushed and that findings would be delivered to the Caddo District Attorney's Office. Whether Shamar Elkins died from a self-inflicted wound or from officer gunfire remains officially under investigation. At 7:03 a.m. on April 19, 2026, he was pronounced dead at the scene. Now say their names one more time. Jayla Elkins, 3 years old. Shayla Elkins, 5 years old. Braylin Snow, 5 years old. Caleb Pugh, 6 years old. Kadarian Snow, 6 years old. Layla Pugh, 7 years old. Markaden Pugh, 10 years old. Serayah Snow, 11 years old. 5 girls, 3 boys, all of them killed before 7 in the morning on a Sunday in Shreveport, Louisiana. 2 days after the shooting, on April 21st, the U.S. Department of Justice provided the first public answer to how the weapons reached Shamar Elkins. Federal agents charged a 56-year-old Shreveport resident named Charles Ford, himself a convicted felon, with being a felon in possession of a firearm and making a false statement to federal agents. ATF investigators traced the Mossberg rifle back through its chain of ownership. The original legal purchaser was identified and interviewed. That person named Charles Ford as the individual she had transferred the weapon to. When federal agents first sat down with Ford, he denied ever having the rifle. He said he knew nothing about it. Then the evidence closed around him. He admitted he had kept it under the seat of his truck. He admitted he believed Elkins had taken it from him. Ford now faces up to 15 years on the felon in possession charge. An additional 5 years for making false statements to federal investigators. U.S. Attorney Zachary Keller confirmed publicly that the investigation into the full firearms acquisition chain is ongoing. 2 convicted felons. 1 illegal weapon passed between them. A legal prohibition on Shamar Elkins that had been in the system since 2019. And not 1 flag raised until 8 children were already gone. How Elkins obtained the handgun used at Harrison Street has still not been publicly addressed. That answer has not come yet. As of April 23, 2026, 4 separate investigations remain open and active. The ATF's full firearms procurement inquiry. The federal prosecution of Charles Ford. The Louisiana State Police officer involved shooting investigation. And the Shreveport Police Department's active motive investigation. None of those have produced final public findings. Shreveport Police Chief Wayne Smith said at his Monday press conference that the violence stemmed from a domestic dispute and added that the chances were good this was not the first time, implying prior incidents that went unreported or simply never documented. The Louisiana Governor's Love One Louisiana Foundation covered all funeral costs for the 8 children. The Community Foundation of North Louisiana launched dedicated survivor funds for the families. Both Christina Snow and Shaniqua Pugh, as of the most recent confirmed reporting, are expected to survive. Shaniqua sustained multiple gunshot wounds to the face and stomach and has undergone multiple surgeries, according to her aunt's account to the New York Times. Both women are alive. Both women have to find a way to live inside what happened. Now step back from everything. The timeline, the names, the addresses, the charges. Step all the way back and look at the full picture as a single frame. A 2019 weapons conviction sitting in law enforcement records, legally barring Elkins from any firearm until 2029. A voluntary January 2026 VA hospitalization following a confirmed suicide attempt, after which he was discharged back into an unchanged environment. A divorce proceeding moving through the court system with a finalization date set for the morning after. A 2023 death threat against his wife and children that lived only in private family memory. An Easter Sunday crisis call where he said the words out loud and nothing happened next. 5 data points, 5 systems, none of them touching, none of them aware of what the others held. This case forces questions that do not have easy answers and do not have comfortable homes in any single policy conversation. Should a VA psychiatric discharge for a veteran with an active firearms prohibition and a contested divorce proceeding automatically trigger cross-agency notification? Should a domestic violence lethality screening be mandatory when a divorce is filed against a respondent with a prior weapons conviction? What would it actually take to connect those systems in real time, before a court date becomes a deadline? Those are not rhetorical questions. They are the questions that 8 families in Shreveport are now living inside every single day. This case is not closed. When the Ford prosecution moves forward, when the Louisiana State Police release their findings, when the full ATF firearms trace is made public, the picture will sharpen. There are still answers outstanding. Still details not yet confirmed. Still a chain of events between 9 in the evening and 5:55 in the morning that no public source has fully accounted for. And there is one more thread that has not been fully pulled yet. Because while the world was watching Shreveport process what happened on West 79th Street, the federal case against Charles Ford was quietly building into something larger than 1 man and 1 rifle. The ATF investigation into who else may be connected to that weapons chain, and what other transactions may be part of it, is still active and still expanding. The name Charles Ford may not be the last name charged in this case. Stay with this channel, because when the next piece of this case breaks, when the investigations close and the findings go to the district attorney's office, this will be the place that walks through every detail the way these 8 children deserved from the very beginning. Verified, sourced, complete, nothing added for shock, nothing left out for comfort. Jayla, Shayla, Braylin, Caleb, Kadarian, Layla, Markaden, Serayah, their names stay on the record, and this channel will be here until the full accounting is written.